Alright, this is lesson 2.1. Again, I'm calling it lesson 2.1 Remix. In the previous lesson, I showed you how to solve equations graphically by using a graphing calculator. In this lesson, I'm going to show you two methods, but instead of using a graphing calculator, we're going to use a website called GeoGebra. Very powerful. But before we get to that, let's just do a quick little review. To solve an equation graphically, the first method I showed you was called the intersect method, and that's where you took each side of an equation and you graphed it separately like it's its own function. So let's say you graph the left-hand side of an equation and it makes a graph that looks like this, and then you graph the other side and it makes a graph that looks like this. Where those two graphs intersect, those are the solutions to this equation. It will give you two sets of coordinates, two sets of xy coordinates. The solutions will be the x coordinate of each. So this graph has two different intersection or two different solutions. Now, the other method would be called the x-intercept or the root method. That's where you graph one function, and where it crosses the x-axis, those are the solutions or the roots. And again, it will be an xy pair for each, and your solutions will be just the x coordinate of each. Okay, that's the x-intercept or the root method. And this is the intersect method, where two graphs intersect. So let's take a look at the website and I'll get you started. Alright, so to complete this assignment, you're going to have to go to Google Classroom. Again, it's the 2.1 Remix, and click on the link to the GeoGebra website. Now it should take you right to a login that looks like this. It's inviting you into a classroom activity called Lesson 2.1 Remix, Solving Graphically. It's asking you to put your name in. Instead of doing that, what you want to do is click the sign in button. Now, in every other instance, I've said use the Google login, but you don't have an account here yet. So your first task is to create an account. So click on Create Account. Now when you get here, this is where you're going to want to click on the Google sign in. And your name should show up here, or your email address should show up there, and your username should show up here. I'm using a test student account or student test account. That's why it looks like that. Click the little box that says you agree with the terms, and then hit Create Account. Now you can take the time to put in the information in the profile, but my suggestion is that you at least uncheck some of these boxes so that you don't get a bunch of notifications, and then click Let's Get Started. Alright, once it has established an account, it will take you here, but this is not where I want you to be. This has just created your account. So go ahead and close that tab. Go back to Google Classroom and re-click that link, and it should take you to what looks like the same window, but now your name is entered in the name slot for you, and you can just click Start. Alright, it should take you to this activity. So things to notice, this is an activity. Over on the left-hand side, there are three what's called chapters. There's an introduction, an intersection method, and a roots method. So I'm going to show you the introduction, and then you'll be responsible for doing the two other chapters. So let's click on the introduction, and what shows up is an activity. So our quick review is in this activity is in the directions, and that is to use the intersection method. You're going to make each side of the graph or each side of the equation its own function. Then you're going to graph both functions. Then you'll find the intersection point, and those x coordinates will be the solution. So I'm going to scroll down. Okay, here is an equation. negative x to the fourth plus 3 equals x to the third minus 2x. To use the intersection method, you're going to take the left-hand side of the equation and you're going to enter it into this graphing calculator. So, to enter negative x to the fourth plus 3, you can use your keyboard. You hit negative and then x. Now, to raise a variable to an exponent, you can use the caret key. That's the one that's above the number 6 on your keyboard, so you hit Shift 6 and then you hit the exponent. See how it's created an exponent? Now before you go to the next part of that equation, you have to use the right arrow key to go over to get out of the exponent. Then you hit plus 3 and enter. And the graph of negative x to the fourth plus 3 shows up on the graph. And down below there will be a keyboard or some functions. You can close that. Okay, then you're going to put the other half of this equation in its own function in the next blank. So you click on that, you hit x raised to the third power, so Shift 6 to the third, right arrow over to get out of the exponent, and then hit minus 2x. And you can see, and you hit enter, you can see that the second graph shows up on the graph. Now those two red and blue graphs intersect each other, and you could probably zoom in and try to figure that out, but there's a function in this key or this graphing calculator that lets you type in a command to find it, and that command is intersect. So you just type intersect, intersect, and then parentheses. Now it's asking you, what do you want me to look for? All you have to tell it is function f and function g. So I'm going to type f parentheses x, that's f of x, that's the first function, then comma g parentheses x, that's the second, and hit enter. And what it gives you is the 2 points where the two graphs intersect. And remember, it's the x coordinate, so it's negative 1.25 and 1.34. And that's it. So that's the intersection method. You find the intersection method solutions by graphing each side of the equation and finding where they cross. Okay, the roots method is a little bit different. With the roots method, you're going to take an equation like this one, and instead of graphing one side as one function and the other side as another function, you're going to take this equation and get it to be equal to 0, and then use all of one side as one function to graph. So, first thing I have to do is move all my variables to one side. I'm going to choose to move them over to the left. So I'm going to subtract x to the third, and I get negative x to the fourth minus x to the third plus 3 equals negative 2x. And then I'm going to add 2x to both sides. And that gets me an equation or a function equal to 0. And notice I'm putting the terms of this equation in order from greatest exponent to least. So this is the function I'm going to use now. I'm going to take this function and graph it in the graphing calculator in GeoGebra and figure out where it crosses the x-axis. So now that I have that function equal to 0, I'm going to take the left-hand side. Now you might need a piece of paper and pencil to do a little scratch work on your own so that you can get the equation set equal to 0, but what I ended up with is negative x to the fourth power minus x to the third power plus 2x plus 3. This function graphs this purple graph. Now I want to know what the solutions to this equation are, and I want to know that by figuring out where it crosses the x-axis. So I hit enter, it gives me a new blank. Another name for the points that cross the x-axis are called roots. So I'm just going to type in roots, and the roots I'm trying to figure out are for the function f of x. So I hit parentheses and then type in f of x and hit enter. And what you notice is I get 2 points that cross the x-axis at negative 1.25 and 1.34. And those just happen to be the same points that I got in the previous method, negative 1.25 and 1.34. Okay, so quick review. To use the intersection method, I'm going to make each side its own function, graph it, find where they intersect, and those are the solutions. To use the x-intercept method, I'm going to manipulate the equation so that it's equal to 0, graph the non-zero side as one function, and find the points where it crosses the x-axis, known as roots. Okay, to find the intersection points on a graph in this calculator, you type in intersect, and then put the 2 function names, f of x and g of x. To find the roots, you put in the one equation, and then you type the command roots, and enter f of x. Now the other stuff that showed up here shows up automatically, it just has to do with the size of the graph. So if I do it again, roots, parentheses, f of x, and hit enter, it gives me the answers, but this other stuff just shows up there. Alright, your job is to go to the intersection method and do that 5 times with these 5 equations. Problem 1, problem 2, problem 3, there's 5 different blanks for you to enter that information into. Okay, then in x-intercept method or the roots, you're going to do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 different spots for you to enter those answers in. And when you're all done, I will be able to look at your work and see that you're doing it correctly. Good luck.